Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Enter the Abyss. If you're following us after episode 1, hopefully we didn't bore you to death. It was our first time doing this. I promise you we will get better as we go on.
And we did a lot of research on some really good topics. I'm going to be going over Skinwalker Ranch tonight.
Ooh, awesome. And I'm actually going to be talking about the Wendigo.
Ooh, spooky stuff. So guys, stay tuned. This is going to be great content.
And speaking of the research piece, I don't think I've ever researched anything half as much, not even when I was in school.
Yeah, in one day I did about 6 hours of research, so I dreamt about this stuff.
I'm never going to forget about the Wendigo ever. It's ingrained in my head.
You should be obligated to listen to this whole thing. Britton, have you heard of Skinwalker Ranch?
I have, and I know it's actually not too far away from us here.
Yeah, it's actually located in the Uinta Basin, so for all the viewers who don't know, we are located in Utah.
Oh, Utah.
Ah, yeah. So there are 5 major players when it comes to Skinwalker Ranch. The first one is going to be an alias for the Gorman family. That's not their real names, but they have changed it to protect their identities. The second one is Robert Bigelow.
Like Deuce Bigelow?
No, he's actually a billionaire who owns an aerospace company.
Oh, okay, wow.
Guy's crazy. And we have George Knapp, and then we have Adamantium Real Estate.
Awesome. Adamantium, kind of like Wolverine's claws.
Yeah. So let's jump into the story here. We'll start with the Gorman family. So the Gormans bought the place in 1994. He has a wife and 2 kids. And the one thing that really struck out to them is when they bought the house, all the doors had a ton of locks on them.
Like the old school bolts and chains?
Yeah, like there was multiple bolts, the 2 entrances on the house.
So they're trying to keep something out.
Yeah, and what was also strange was there was bolts on the cabinets too.
The cabinets, the kitchen cabinets?
Yes, there was bolts on everything.
You can't have cereal.
I mean, if you were moving into a house, would that be kind of a red flag for you?
Yeah, I mean, they can be removed, but I would want to know why they're there.
Another interesting thing is they had 2 giant metal stakes on both entrances with big chains, which they presume was for giant guard dogs. So, previous owners were a little bit weird.
Like big Rottweiler dogs.
Yeah.
Or hellhounds.
And they had some weird rule about the house that they told the Gormans. The rule was never dig.
Never dig.
Yeah. Didn't expand on that. Just
this
said
was
never dig.
The realty group that sold them the house so they can never dig.
It was a private seller.
Okay.
So on the first day of moving in, the family was just sitting outside, and they saw a giant wolf in the distance. I mean, this thing was way huge from just regular wolves.
So it's not your just typical wolf. Because, I'm saying it's a ranch. It's in the middle of the desert in Utah. You're going to see a couple wildlife animals there.
So this wolf starts walking up to the family. What would you do?
I would go inside and I'd bolt every goddamn lock on that door because there's like 13 of them.
The family didn't do that. They just let it walk up, and the wolf literally just got on its back and let the little kids pet it. It was almost like it was domesticated.
A domesticated wolf, okay.
Yeah, really strange. The family commented that it even smelled like a wet dog because it was raining earlier.
Right. So, I don't know, would you let this wolf come up to you? You said it's huge, bigger than a regular wolf.
Right.
No, I'm not going to sit there and let it have it. It's just coming up to me, no.
I would have ran inside the house.
Yeah.
I'll tell you that right now.
Stuffing the kids in the cabinets, locking them up.
So, everything's going great, but all of a sudden, the wolf makes a beeline. It jumps over to the corral, and there's a calf with its head sticking out of the corral, and the wolf just chomps down on its head and starts trying to pull it out of the corral.
Yeah, that could be the kids.
That's income for the family. Mr. Gorman shouts at his son, goes, "Hey, I have a gun in my car, go grab it." The son runs into his truck, grabs the car. It's a .357 Magnum. This is a very powerful gun.
I was going to say, it has to be pretty powerful.
He gets the gun, and he shoots the wolf point blank 3 times.
Right in the face, I'm assuming.
Well, it was right around the body section of it.
Okay.
Didn't do anything to the wolf. The wolf didn't even wince.
So
okay?
it's Superman wolf.
Apparently, yeah.
Just bounces right off of him.
And the calf is about to pass out. He's about to die. He's bleeding. Blood is going everywhere. Mr. Gorman, the rancher, he shouts for his son to go grab his hunting rifle. He runs. He gets the rifle. And, again, he shoots at it point blank. There was flesh that got hit off the wolf, like chunks of flesh that went onto the ground.
Chunking off.
And after 3 shots, the wolf just let go, looked over at the family, and then just casually trotted off into the distance.
Okay, so the whole time they're shooting at him, he's still trying to pull this cow right out from the fence, essentially.
Right. And the reaction of the wolf is just strange because it doesn't look like it's in pain. It's not limping. It's just trotting away.
So he's kind of pissed off. He's like, look, I'm trying to eat your cow. You don't need to, shoot at me. Let me go. And he's like, I'll come back later.
And this is where the rancher, honestly, I feel like Mr. Gorman is kind of a badass because he's pissed off, right?
Right.
So he's like, I can't have this wolf running around my property attacking my animals. He goes, hey, son, let's go fucking track down this wolf and we're going to go kill it.
Okay.
So the wolf is running and it runs through a bunch of this dense shrubbery and it's muddy as hell. It's like a gorge sort of or something like that. And they're going after the wolf and they can just kind of see it in the distance through the shrubbery. They can see that its tracks, and the wolf is huge, so the tracks itself are about 2 to 3 inches deep. They get to a clearing. It's just a valley. It's still muddy, and they don't see the wolf. But the crazy thing is you see the tracks in the mud get to the middle of the clearing, and it just vanishes.
Just disappears.
Right.
Great.
It appears that the wolf just disappeared in thin air. Disheartened, they go back to the ranch. Mr. Gorman picks up the chunk of flesh that's on the ground by the corral, and it smells like rotting meat. What he described it as meat sitting out in the sun for 2 weeks.
Oh, yum.
That is the first incident that they had.
Wow. All right. So, I mean...
First day at the house.
Yeah, first day at the house. It comes up to the kids. It's like, hey, rub my stomach. This is great. Hey, fuck your cow. I'm going to go rip its head off. They're shooting at it. It just walks off and says, yeah, whatever, I'm done.
I mean,
and then disappears.
I wouldn't even know what to think at that point.
Yeah. Okay. Step one, or, let's see, problem one. The house is bolted shut.
Right.
Step two, this giant wolf that can just disappear on command.
Almost has supernatural powers.
Yeah. So I think we know what the locks are for.
Right.
I'm going to put 2 and 2 together. I'm probably going to contact the private seller. Dude, what's up? What's going on?
I would definitely want to move out. Now, throughout the stories, people talk about Mr. Gorman being stubborn. And he's like, no way. I'm not moving out. I'm not going to contact the previous people. We bought this house. We're going to live here.
Well, it's the principle and the pride, right? He's like, no, I bought this house. This bitch-ass wolf's not going to kick me out of here.
And I just want to say one thing about Mr. Gorman. He's not some back-end-woods redneck person. He actually had university degrees. He specialized in animal husbandry, and his livestock was top of the line. So the first thing that the family starts noticing is things like poltergeist activity when they're living in the house. It's a lot of small things, but I mean, they're really freaky. Kind of like the classic horror movie tropes where objects were being moved to weird locations.
So he's just toying with him at first, right? You got to get a little suspense built up.
Yeah. So Mrs. Gorman talked about towels, like their bath towels, disappearing, and then weeks later, they'd find them in the freezer.
Okay, towels in the freezer. So he's just messing with them. Like,
right.
Yeah, there's no real relevance behind this. It's
straight up trolling.
Okay.
Another creepy incident is Mr. Gorman, the rancher, was digging fence poles out in the yard.
He's not supposed to dig. Remember? He's not supposed to dig. He's fucking up.
So,
it's his problem.
I agree. I mean, they told him not to dig.
And
so
now he's digging.
He's digging fence poles, okay? He puts the shovel down, wipes the sweat off his brow, takes a sip of water, turns behind him, shovel's gone. I would be so upset.
Check the freezer.
They did actually find it a few weeks later, and it was 40 feet up in a tree.
In a tree.
In a tree.
Okay.
Like, there is no possible way he could have put it up
So
there.
the ghost just yeeted this thing across the farm.
Yeah, he yeeted it. Another occurrence that the mom talked about, she was coming home with groceries, and she put them all away. She walked into the bathroom to come out to find all the food back in the grocery bags.
Okay.
I mean, to me, that just like makes my hair raise. I don't like that at all.
So I want to know what the ghost's intentions are, because it wants the towels in the freezer, it doesn't like the shovels on the ground, and it doesn't like groceries in the cabinets.
To really get an answer to this, you're really just going to have to listen to all of it, because there's so much in here, and it's really hard to know. This escalates. They start to see weird shadows inside the house. When they're asleep, they hear heavy footsteps outside their bedroom door. Mr. Gorman, he'd get up, he'd open the door, nobody's there, they would stop, and then he'd get back to the bed and they would just start again. His kids complained about seeing humanoid creatures outside their window at night.
Oh, God.
It's so freaky. What's even worse is they started out outside, but they claimed that they would wake up in the middle of the night and they couldn't move and they'd be at the foot of their bed.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
It's like a sleep paralysis type thing where they just wake up and they can't move.
Exactly. They would occasionally hear distant voices speaking in a foreign language above them when they're walking out in the field. There was actually an incident that happened when they were walking home at night, and they kept hearing the voices, and this is why I love Mr. Gorman, dude. He is just a badass.
Badass.
He screams up into the air saying, "Shut up, we don't know what you're saying," something along those lines, okay? And the voices stop.
Shut the hell up.
Yeah, and the voices stop.
And leave my shovels alone.
For a while.
Okay.
And then they continue in a mocking tone. Like, again, like you don't understand what they're saying, but you can kind of interpret what a mocking tone is.
Right. Like, oh, shut up. Right?
Yes, exactly. Here's something that's weird. They would sometimes hear what sounded like loud machinery under their house, and it would shake the ground. Let me describe it to you, because it's kind of hard to think about. The analogy they used is a train passing by you.
Okay. But under the house.
Under the house. There was a correlation to when this happened to places in the ranch would be lit up in the middle of the night when that would happen, just like a football stadium.
Good Lord.
Super bright lights. And the lights would either come down from the sky or would come from the ground to the sky.
Right. Okay. Did the house shake kind of like it was a train, or was it just the noise?
It would shake
Okay.
and the noise.
Okay.
So there would be both on there.
So there's legit like a train running underneath the house. That's what it sounds like.
That's what it sounds like.
Okay.
Nothing like a train like horn or anything like that, just shaking, and I don't know. The family started to become paranoid. I mean, obviously I would. They thought that they were constantly being watched no matter where they were.
Right. Wait, hold on. Now they're just getting paranoid? I mean, all the shit that's already happened.
You know that feeling when you feel like you're being watched, right?
Oh, yeah.
They would just feel that everywhere now.
Right.
And they all expressed this thought that whatever was causing this could read their minds.
Oh.
Which is kind of weird.
Okay. So you're not safe in your own head anymore. Now
Right.
they're mocking you, they're following you, and now they can read what you're thinking.
And here's what I'm thinking, too. It's like the kids are like, oh, my gosh, I don't want to look out this window and see something. They look out and they see it. And like, oh, man, that's bad. What if that's on the foot of my bed later? And then there it is.
Right. So I know in the first episode we talked, I mentioned the movie Signs, and you said you hated it.
Hate Signs.
So that scene when she looks out the window and that alien is standing across on the neighbor's house freaked the shit out of me. So that's what I imagine this here. So this is actually, it's kind of freaky to me to look out, especially if my kid comes to me and says, there's someone outside the house.
If I was in this situation, I probably would have already left.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, a couple months into the ranch, Gormans are coming home from town, and they see something by their horse's pen. The rancher describes it as something low to the ground, heavily muscled, weighing about 200 pounds, with curly red hair, bushy tail, and long claws. When I was reading this, I was thinking about that creature in Resident Evil, the Licker.
The Licker?
For all of our viewers, I'd recommend that you just type in Resident Evil and then the Licker and go to images, and you'll know what I'm talking about. Again, the rancher here is trying to protect his animals, so he gets out of the car and runs right at this thing. This guy's a badass.
Yeah, seriously, he's just running straight at this thing. But
Yeah.
I mean, he's got to protect his livestock.
I mean, this is his livelihood. He gets to about 40 feet of this thing, and again, it just disappears. He's thinking it's crazy at this moment, right? I would think I'm going nuts.
Yeah, and he doesn't have a gun, so what, is he just going to go strangle this thing to death?
I don't know what he was thinking, man. It's just fight or flight, and again, he's a badass.
Yeah, it doesn't matter to him. He's like, you know what? We're going for this thing.
He's going, hey, am I crazy or not? But then he looks at his horses, and there's claw marks all over their legs.
Oh, wow.
He actually has physical proof that this event happened.
Okay.
Here's another story, and this is one of my favorites. It's not as scary, but I find it hilarious. They're kind of talking around the town about these stories, and they actually get into the news, so a lot of people are reading about these crazy things happening over at Skinwalker Ranch.
Well, I'm sure he's going into town, and he's like, guys, you'll never believe this shit.
Yeah.
I've got wolves that can disappear. I've got a Licker that's going after my horses.
This is just going all around town, even like regionally, like the state of Utah knows about this.
So did the town, I mean, sorry to cut you up.
Yeah.
Did the town start to think that he's losing his mind now, too? Like,
No.
he made it into the paper.
So that's a good thing you're bringing up. This place isn't confined to Skinwalker Ranch.
Okay.
It happens the most in it, but this is going on all throughout the Uinta Basin. George Knapp actually went in and did interviews for people in that area,
Right.
and they're like, yeah, this stuff happens all the time.
Okay. So a lot of credibility coming from the town. Skinwalker Ranch seems to be kind of like the point of which it happens all the time.
What they were saying is it's the highway that the Skinwalker crosses.
Ah.
Something like that.
Okay.
So back to the story. So some crazy dude hearing these stories goes, I got to go to this property. I got to figure this out. So he goes to the edge of the property, just starts blaring his horn, right? Because there's a gate. It's a private road.
Okay.
So he's blaring his horn. Gorman and their son are like, what the hell is this guy doing? So they drive over there with their truck, and the guy's like, hey, a higher power has told me to come here, and I need to meditate and talk to these higher beings.
A higher power.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right? This guy is just nuts. The Gorman and his son are like, okay, this will be fun to watch. So they put him on the back of his truck,
Right.
And they drive him to this area where they have seen like a lot of weird stuff going on, like orbs in the sky. We'll get to that later.
Okay.
They drop him off and they just kind of watch him from a distance. So this guy is just closing his eyes and meditating, maybe making some weird like humming noises. I don't know what people do when they meditate. Sorry if I'm being rude.
Yeah,
And-
don't be. Yeah, for those that do, meditation's a really good thing, obviously. But I imagine these guys are like, they're getting the popcorn, like this is going to be interesting.
Yes. The Gorman and his son were saying that they were laughing at this guy because they're like, look at this crazy guy. While they're laughing, they hear a cowbell, sort of like a cowbell, but it's going really slow, right?
Okay.
And it starts to just kind of get a little bit quicker. And they look to the tree line and they see this blurry, invisible object. They described it like the Predator,
That
like
has a
from the
telltale
movies.
shimmer.
And this thing is going through the tree line and then starts getting closer to the guy that's meditating. This large, blurry mass gets right up in front of this guy's face. He's completely unaware of it.
I'm picturing the guys that are watching this, right? They're just sitting there going, do we say anything? Do we tell them this guy's just about to get murdered right here? Or do they sit there and go, well, this guy's kind of asking for it?
I don't know. I mean,
This would be entertaining to
I
see
would
from a
probably
third-party
just watch.
perspective. Like, hey, never mind, keep going.
it gets right up to his face and just screams. Like it's like a roar, like an animal roar.
Jeez.
This guy opens his eyes and just starts screaming as well, runs over to Mr. Gorman and just like grabs onto him and says, I got to get off this property. I got to get off this property. They drive him to the edge. Never heard from him again.
Poor guy.
Yeah.
So he's got to go talk to this higher power because
Apparently that higher power hates hippies.
it's hippies.
All right, so we're going to transition to sky objects. The most notorious thing that I read in here were these things called the blue orbs. They were about the size of softballs, and they would just float in the air.
Okay.
What the family said, and I was trying to understand this, but whenever they saw the blue orbs, it would induce extreme fear in them.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you saw a blue orb floating around your property, what's the first thing you're thinking of?
But the thing is, these guys were getting jaded to this point, right?
Okay.
So they're saying, oh, wow, orbs this, or they'd see some weird animal. But whenever they saw the blue orbs, they would just have an irrational, extreme fear response.
Okay, so kind of like an anxiety, kind of like a panic attack.
Exactly. Another orb they would see, which would not trigger this, is orange orbs. And what I found interesting about this is Mr. Gorman grabbed binoculars at one point, looked up into these orange orbs, and he described it that he was looking into a different world's sky.
Wow.
Which is strange.
So
These
kinda
orbs
like-
were actually the size of basketballs. Sorry, I missed that point. He would see animals or objects fly out of the orange orbs and into the orange orbs.
Sounds like he's on a trip.
Yeah. We'll get into some more stuff on the blue orbs later, but I want to jump into a story which is another one of my favorites. I've talked to Britton about this one a little bit. You guys are in for a treat. So Mr. Gorman is out on business for the night, and Mrs. Gorman is going to be home alone, so she's driving home. And to me, I've joked about this a little bit, but this cements the idea that the creature can read people's mind, or the entity, or whatever you want to call it. So she's driving home. She's clearly probably scared about spending the night home alone in this crazily haunted ranch.
Yeah, she should be.
So she's driving home, and she looks up, and she sees a black triangular object in the sky following her. So she's freaking out, and she gets home. She immediately runs into her house, locks all the bolts, and I guarantee you she's thinking in her head, oh, God, I hope this thing doesn't land. I hope this thing doesn't land. Again, did this thing read its mind? Because she looks outside the window, and this fucker has landed into the ground.
Of course.
And I guarantee you she's like, man, I don't want these things to come out. Oh, my God. Then what happens? The door opens. She describes it as a room full of light. And she sees a humanoid figure about 7 feet tall in a military uniform, but doesn't quite look human. And there's a desk in the middle of the room. The humanoid has some type of visor on this head. Ladies and gentlemen, this is ridiculous. But he proceeds to go sit at the desk and just stare back at her in the window.
So this thing lands, door opens, 7-foot guy just standing there with his crazy ass visor and military uniform on, and then just sits there and stares at her.
Yes.
Okay.
It is a bizarre story.
I don't know if I believe this one.
We'll talk about it because if you believe in the premise at the end, it's all true.
Oh.
The next day, Mr. Gorman comes home. I'm sure the wife was probably sleeping with her kids in the living room or something like that.
No, she's sitting on the front porch with a big glass of whiskey and a cigarette, and you're not going to believe the shit that took place.
You're never leaving home again.
You don't get to leave on business.
Mr. Gorman goes and investigates the scene. The only thing they find is 2 14-inch boot prints in the ground.
Boot prints.
Yeah, that's it.
Were they a size 40?
14-inch. So, Britton, how would you feel about this at this point? What would be going through your head? What would you want to do?
Well, okay, so you mentioned something earlier where they were kind of becoming jaded to the whole thing, right? Like, it's just something else that's happening. I don't know if I would have let it... I mean, okay, you got the big-ass wolf, you got this liquor thing. If I came home from business and my wife was like, yeah, something landed in the yard, orbs flying around with animals coming out of them, I think at this point I'm ready to sell.
I mean, I want to put it in Mr. Gorman's perspective. So he has 40 head of cow, bunch of horses, bunch of dogs, bunch of cats. He's farming, so he has a bunch of crops on the ground. It would cost him a lot of money to move.
That's true.
And I think this might be part of the reason why he's being so stubborn. But I'm going to tell you, this shit gets a lot worse.
Of course it does.
And we're going to start diving into the really, I'm going to say, fucked up stuff. Sorry.
How dare you?
Let's move into the cattle and animal mutilations.
Okay,
area.
this is what I've heard the most of Skinwalker Ranch. I've heard a lot of the cattle and the mutilations piece, so I'm kind of excited to hear what you've dug up, though.
Yeah, and if you guys notice the way that this story's been structured, it's in categories, but really what's going on is it just keeps escalating, right? This is almost like a timeline of what's going on here.
Yeah, and it's kind of like that movie Paranormal Activity where night 1, and it's like the sheets move a little bit, and then at the end of the movie, it's like night 15 and shit's flying around and she's getting possessed, like the whole theater sinks in their seats. That's kind of what I imagine's happening here.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so Mr. Gorman is outside his house at night with his 3 best hunting dogs. He sees the blue orbs into the sky again in the distance.
Right.
This induces terrible fear. At the same time, Mr. Gorman, being the badass that he is,
doesn't give a shit.
Well, he's like, fuck it, dude. I'm going to send these dogs to go try to attack the orbs.
Oh, God. Okay, hold on a second.
It's not all his dogs. It's his 3 best hunting dogs.
3 best hunting dogs. He's going to send after these things.
Exactly. So he lets them go, and he's watching the dogs chase the orbs. They're jumping in the air, and they're trying to bite him. But these orbs, just in the nick of time, they just dodge all the bites.
Well, they're toying with them.
Yeah, they're toying. Like, they're under intelligent control. The orbs are leading the dogs over to a thick brush. Then Mr. Gorman hears 3 blood-curdling yelps from the area where the dogs went. This is the one time that Mr. Gorman backed down. He was just too afraid to investigate the situation, and he came back in the morning. So he goes through the brush, and he sees 3 round spots of dried, brittle vegetation. In the middle of these are black, greasy lumps.
Okay, he didn't even go after him that night. He sent the dogs after these orbs. He hears a terrible yelp, and then just like, I'll go check on him in the morning.
Well, he's too afraid, man. I mean, the orbs...
This is Mr. Gorman, the badass.
The orbs have a supernatural ability from his perspective and his family's to induce fear.
It's Mr. Gorman's kryptonite, these blue orbs.
Can't prove that it's his dogs, but he never saw him again.
Oh, Haley, I'm so sorry. Haley, my wife, is not going to like this one because every time there's a scary movie with a dog in it, the first question she asks is, does the dog die? Well, I'm sorry to say, Haley, yes.
Mr. Gorman loved those dogs, and he later recounted this is one of the major events that made him decide to move from the ranch.
Yeah, I think that would be the kind of the final straw for me as well.
All right, Britton, here's another one of those wacky stories that I like. Mr. Gorman, his son, sitting out there by the pastures, just hanging out, when they see what they think is a recreational vehicle, like a Winnebago. That's what it's called, I believe.
A Winnebago?
Winnebago, thank you. And it's just parked out on their property. Thing is, this is all private land. There's only one road into his property, and there's a gate.
Yeah.
So he's like, but what are they doing on my property? He decides that, hey, maybe they somehow got in. Maybe it's broken down. I mean, the thing's not moving. Let's go see if they need help.
Okay.
The son and him start walking over to the object, the Winnebago. And while they're walking towards it, it starts moving towards them. But what they notice is it's not making any sound.
Maybe it's an electric Winnebago.
Yeah, I don't know. But here's what happens. So they get pretty close to it, and the thing just goes up into the air and just flies away.
Okay.
Another one of those weird, wacky stories that they had.
And this is Mr. Grumman and his son are both saying this.
Yes, exactly.
Did I say Mr. Grumman? I meant Mr. Gorman. God damn it.
Things keep escalating from here. Mr. Gorman keeps seeing his horses getting more slashes on their legs. In one night, 8 of their cats disappeared and never came back. One cattle got out of its corral. Mr. Gorman was tracking it. And in the middle of the snow The tracks just stopped.
Huh.
Never saw the cow again.
I wonder if there's like some secret portal in this field.
It's either that or he just got plucked up into the sky and never came back. Now, here's another bit of evidence that whatever this entity is could read minds. Gorman's freaking out here. He's afraid that his livestock is getting injured. He's going to lose money. They're going to fold on their ranch. And he tells his wife that if his 4 prize bulls get hurt, they're going to go under. Like, they're literally going to have to foreclose.
Right. Like, don't touch the fucking cattle.
Right. So he's talking to her about this while they're driving into town to buy some groceries. And they come back, and the bulls are gone. So I just want to preface this real quick. These bulls are 2,000 pounds. They're high end. I mean, they're worth a lot of money.
Well, literally cash cows.
So they're freaking out. I mean, they've only been gone for about 30 minutes. So they're looking all over the ranch looking for these bulls. For whatever reason, Mr. Gorman stands up on a box, and he looks over at a trailer that's been locked up. I mean, this thing is locked with like a barbed wire and things like that. It hasn't been opened since they've been on the property. And he just sees the head of one bull. Like, it's not cut off, just the top of the head of a bull.
Okay.
He yells to his wife. He's like, hey, they're in there. Now, I just want to say, this trailer isn't big.
So they're stuffed in there.
Yeah. 2,000-pound bulls. There's only one entrance, and their head is like right on the metal side of it, and their butt's on the other metal side of it. Oh. There's no way you could get bulls into this thing. The moment he yells at, the bulls were like in some type of trance. They were quiet. They weren't moving. They start freaking out and just start kicking the walls. They end up opening it up and letting out the bulls, but they have no idea how they got in there.
Yeah. Well, they're packed in like sardines. Now, I'm just going to say, if they can suspect that they're reading their minds, stop thinking about the shit you don't want them to do.
How do you do that, man?
I don't know. But okay, think about this, Clete. I'm like, oh, hey, they can't touch the cattle. Well, what are they going to do?
I just feel like if I told you not to think about something for at least one day, you're probably going to have trouble not thinking of that thing.
Right. But it's like
Brayden, I'll give you $1 million if you don't think of purple elephants for one day.
Done.
Did you think about it?
No. No, I'm thinking, I don't want to think about that.
All right. Mr. Gorman keeps spreading out news about what's going on in his property. He gets in contact with the NIDS team. Do you know what the NIDS team is?
No.
They are actually named after an organization called the National Institute of Discovery Science. This thing is funded by Robert Bigelow, which is, again, a billionaire aerospace engineer person. I mean, he owns like a firm that makes rocket ships or something like that.
Bigwig.
This guy actually, back in the day, would fund teams to go investigate cattle mutilations.
Specifically?
Yep. Or any other like freaky paranormal stuff. So
right. So they hear about something. Hey, you need to go check this shit out now.
Right. And it's not just a team of like you or me. Not saying that we're idiots.
Hey, we're a goddamn great team.
But these guys are PhDs in physics.
Sciencey stuff.
Yeah, very sciencey stuff. They go in there, they fly in a jet, and they investigate these things.
The Men in Black.
Right. Sort of. Mr. Gorman has their number. One day, Mr. Gorman is like, hey, I have a bunch of newborn calves I had in the last week. We need to go tag their ears.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how they mark it, so no other ranchers take their calves or something like that. So they go ahead and they find the first calf and they tag its ear, and they go to other places in the field to tag other calves' ears. It's about 40 minutes that they've been doing this, and they hear another one of their dogs bark in the direction of where the first calf was.
So they had at least 9 cats that went missing. They lost 3 dogs. How many pets do these people have?
Well, I mean, they have a lot. I'll tell you one thing. At the end of this, Mr. Gorman lost 14 head of cattle out of 40.
Wow.
A lot.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah, it is a lot of money. So the dog's barking to where the first calf was. They see the mother cow like just running in circles, like making noises and dragging one of its legs like it's hurt. This cow is freaking out. It's stressed out.
Right.
Something's going on. So they run over to the cow and they see this baby calf just decimated. I mean, there is no meat on this bone. All that's left is bones and the hide. Every organ and piece of meat has been stripped off. One of the femurs were ripped off from the joints, and it was like thrown a couple feet away. I don't know if you know this, Britton, but ripping off a femur takes a lot of force.
Yeah, no, it's not easy to do.
The rancher calls NIDS. This is actually a really weird coincidence because they were on vacation in Vegas, so they were really close to the ranch. Flew out there in a couple hours and took some samples of the bones and the hide and sent it to 3 independent labs.
So the NIDS were in Vegas and they just hopped, skipped, and jumped right over to the farm.
Exactly.
Okay.
So they sent the samples to the lab. This is crazy what the lab concluded. The calf was cut with 2 very sharp metallic instruments that were used to wipe off the 75 pounds of meat off the calf in the course of a few minutes. One was a machete-like object that was slammed into the bones of the calf, and the other one was like a scalpel, where it used it with precision.
Yeah, it's a precision instrument there.
The last thing they talked about is there was teeth marks on it, on the bones. Teeth marks that they weren't able to identify to any type of animal.
Well, this animal's carrying a machete in one hand, a scalpel in the other, and it's just hacking the shit out of this poor calf. And then chewing on the bones.
Here's the thing, though. No blood.
No blood.
Not a drop of blood anywhere. No blood on the animal. No blood on the ground. No tracks. The conclusion that the NIDS team made is the calf had been taken somewhere for surgery.
And then dropped back off.
So
what? Okay, so then why was the mom just free? Did she not know that her calf was missing, and then all of a sudden it just drops out of the sky?
Who's to say the mom didn't see it? I mean, the mom was fucking freaking out.
Right, just then? Oh, so like in the flash of an eye, it was taken, decimated, dropped back off.
It doesn't make sense.
Okay.
And the thing is, the field that they were tagging the calves in, they had a pretty good view of the whole field. It just happened when their backs were turned. It's just, that is just a creepy story to me. After this, Mr. Gorman is just like, I'm done. I'm selling the ranch. He happens to get in contact with Bigelow somehow. I mean, he hears about the stories. They interview him. He goes, hey, you know what? I'll go ahead and buy your ranch for $200,000. He takes it, buys another ranch with it, and Bigelow actually sets up a permanent site on this ranch to study what's going on here.
Yes, because he wants to get to the bottom of it. So he's like, hey, here's $200,000. I want to buy the ranch. I want to study what's going on here. Did Bigelow actually, was he interested in farming at all, or did he just want the land? He's not a farmer.
No, this guy's a billionaire. He literally bought this just to study paranormal behavior, which I think is actually really cool.
I mean, if I had $200,000, I'd go buy paranormal activities to study it. Why not?
Yeah, I mean, billions. Now, again, this is why I think Gorman is badass. He is so pissed off that this thing has like ruined his family that he convinces Bigelow to let him stay on the ranch and do research with the NIDS team because he wants to get to the bottom of what's going down. He's mad.
Yeah, he wants to know what's going on.
They decide that they're going to go high tech. So they start putting up cameras outside in the ranch in random areas. They put out sensors. They have infrared gear where they can look out there.
Bring in all the tech.
Let's go into the stories that the NIDS team had with the entity is what they called it.
The entity.
So there's one night where Mr. Gorman is sitting outside. He has his gun in hand. Again, he's pissed. He wants to figure out what's going on.
Well, now he's not here to ranch. He's here to fuck shit up.
Yeah. His dogs start to bark that he has with him. Starts to run off into the field. No questions asked. He gets into his truck and just starts following the dog. The NIDS team is scrambling. They're like, well, shit, we got to catch up to this guy. They get into their car and they start following Mr. Gorman.
He's a loose cannon at this point.
Right. So Mr. Gorman ends up parking his car by a tree. What he describes what he saw in this tree is really strange. He says that he saw something up in the tree that had a yellow eye that was about a foot wide. That's all he could see. And he saw some type of bearish-looking creature at the bottom of the tree. He gets up his gun, shoots the bear. The bear disappears. Then he goes, points at the tree and shoots the yellow-eyed thing, and it falls to the ground and runs.
So it's just an eyeball.
Well, it was an eyeball is all he saw, but it had a body, okay?
Okay.
So whatever that was fell from the tree, started running. All they found, the NIDS team, was just a giant footprint that looked like a raptor, is what they said.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, this ranch has some pretty crazy wildlife going on.
It's just such an assortment of bullshit.
Yeah.
It's some crazy stuff. Let's keep going into what the NIDS team saw. There's an incident where there was a group of NIDS people walking through the ranch when they saw a dark cloud circling them. One of the physicists starts speaking, but in a different voice from his natural voice.
Okay.
And he says, "We're watching you. You are not welcome here."
Instantly possessed.
Yeah. And this is someone with a PhD. I mean, I don't think they would be prone to wanting attention like that.
I don't
know,
know,
like, why would he lie?
Maybe he's just dicking around. You never know.
So this is probably the creepiest occurrence that happened to the NIDS team. So there's two agents that were sitting up in a high vantage point, just viewing the ranch with the infrared gear. And there was two agents on the ground just patrolling. So the people on the ground start to see a yellow light just come up from under the ground, just hovering in the air. They go to the two guys up top. They're like, "Hey, do you see that?" And they're like, yeah, we see it. And they're just observing it. So this yellow light is pulsating, and it's just getting bigger and bigger. and it starts to form into a cylinder-like object, and then they see a creature about 8 feet tall come out of this cylinder-like object, and the yellow cylinder just disappears. The creature starts to do a full-on sprint up to where the two agents are at the high vantage point.
Oh, hell no.
Like, I would be fucking terrified.
At that point, I think you just kind of, you stop. You're not going to outrun this thing. It's 8 feet tall. It's booking it at you. Just give up.
They don't know what happened, but it just ended up disappearing before it showed up to them. But I would just be terrified out of my mind. I would think about quitting that now.
I'd pee my pants.
The NIDS team concluded that the entity was toying with them. There was one incident where they had cameras set up, but they got ripped down by some force and broken. Every time they had an area being surveillanced, there would be occurrences in areas that weren't. And then they'd put cameras there, and then the occurrences would happen somewhere else. It was like under intelligent control, and it didn't want to be recorded.
Yeah, and I was going to say, I mean, you need to buy more cameras at this point, because if you're just moving them around, it's gonna move, and obviously none of this stuff is probably caught on camera. You can't see it, because if the NIDS team did catch it, they're going to keep it for themselves.
George Knapp, who was working with the NIDS team, talked about how he felt the entity got irritated that they were trying to find proof of it, and the occurrences started to slow down to where it just stopped. After 8 years of the NIDS team being there, they disbanded the team.
So everything just stopped.
Yes, everything stopped.
Whatever was doing it is like, you know what? This was fun. I just wanted to do something fun.
Just want to mess with a backwater family.
Quit trying to prove me wrong. Quit trying to find out who I am. I'm fucking off now. Bye.
Amen. So now let's get into the theories of what happened. Okay, so theory number 1 is what Mr. Gorman thought was going on the whole time, and he believed it was the military. I mean, they saw a lot of craft in the sky. Could have been experimental planes or military research. That could have just been bizarre.
Yeah, but it doesn't explain the creatures and the cow mutilation. I mean, the light's fine, the sound's fine, but the creatures and the light, I don't see that.
I was listening to George Knapp, and one of his counter arguments to the military doing this is, whose job would it be to go sneak on a ranch and just mutilate the bejesus out of a cow and then go put him back?
A sick individual.
Yeah, I mean, that would be a weird job. I couldn't imagine that would be an actual thing. The second theory is aliens. I mean,
I was waiting for it.
I could see it. Weird craft. I mean, we had Mrs. Gorman and the weird military guy staring at her.
Footprints just stopping as if they were picked up from the sky.
So that's another plausible theory on there. One thing that George Knapp specifically talked about, it's like a doorway to another dimension. Because you're seeing a lot of things that are animals that don't necessarily exist on Earth. So they're going through this dimension and just playing around with us to a degree.
Right.
And another thing is, seems to be intelligently controlled, because they were hurting the animals, but I mean, why weren't they hurting humans?
Yeah.
Were humans like some type of protected species or something?
Well, you go back to the wolf, didn't want to harm any of the kids. In fact, it was kind of more of admiring the fact that they wanted to scratch its stomach, but then it saw the cow. All bets are off at that point.
And they also saw those orange orbs with the things flying in and out of them, and that yellow pulsating orb that was seen by NIDS.
Seems like a bunch of portals.
There was an analogy that George actually put on there that I enjoyed. And with something like this, I'm going to butcher it. But suppose you have an anthill by a highway, and this anthill has sentience, like human sentience.
Okay.
What would they think that the highway is used for? Because you got cars flying by, causing wind gusts, vibrations, and even with all their observational data, they would have no idea of understanding what the highway was and what it was used for. And that's how he kind of related that to the occurrences happening on the ranch. These interdimensional beings could be so far ahead of us that we just couldn't understand what their motives are or what they're doing.
Right. So something bigger is at play, but we don't, we're not going to research it. We don't have the ability to research that.
Or comprehend it, I think.
Or comprehend.
I mean, we can
that's
research
fair.
it, but comprehend, maybe not.
You can find out why, but, you can find out what they're doing, but why, you never know.
Right. And obviously the last one is it's a giant fat hoax, which could be plausible. I mean, Mr. Gorman was behind all the experiences for the most part. I mean, there was a few NIDS teams that had experiences, but I mean, what would have his motives been? Because I mean, he did lose a lot of money in his time going through all of this. He was able to sell his ranch, but I just don't see why he would do it.
Right. Had he bought it for like nothing, and then this NIDS team came in and bought it off of him for millions of dollars, and he's like, ha, suckers. But that didn't happen. He lost a lot. He put his family through a lot. So, I mean, I don't know. I don't think a lot of it is true, but I don't know what intentions. Like, why would you want to mess with someone on that scale?
Well, here's the thing, Britton. I'm going to put it this way. If the interdimensional hypothesis is true, all the weird, stupid bullshit is true.
Yeah.
It's either that, or it could be a subcategory of all the other three. Okay?
Right.
But I mean, I don't think that they would tell truths here and lie here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
It's the whole truth or nothing.
right. That's
Right.
my point of view.
Okay.
I do want to bring one last thing up. Robert Bigelow did sell Skinwalker Ranch to Adamantium Real Estate in 2016 and has been shut off to the public. The crazy thing is, he sold it to the shell company for $4.5 million, and we have no idea who the seller is.
Wow. I was actually going to ask you that. Is this open to the public? Can we go check out this Skinwalker Ranch?
They've literally closed down any public roads going up. So
Nice.
It's all private. It's gated. They have guards up there, so you literally can't get on the property. No one knows who bought it. I think that's crazy.
So all this stuff was happening. This government, entity comes down. This government group comes down to investigate. It all stops. Then it's sold for $4.5 million to someone else, and now it's all closed off.
And
Case closed.
The thing is about the name, though. Like, the
Adamantium.
name is so interesting. And it's just like, it probably was bought by a billionaire, but who? I mean, it could be Robert Bigelow, but I don't know. And why would they buy it for so much money? Outside of that, they're trying to still figure out what's going on up there.
Right, because Bigelow bought it for $200,000, and then it was sold for $4.5 million.
And that's crazy to me. So, guys, this is going to be the end of the Skinwalker Ranch tale. Let me know if you liked it, if you have any questions that I can answer for you. But we are actually going to lead into Britton's story.
All right. Well, thank you, Cleet, for taking us through Skinwalker Ranch. It was actually pretty intense. I didn't expect all that crazy shit to happen, but I'm glad you talked about it. And I know you did a bunch of research to get all that together.
A lot of research.
So I'm actually going to be talking about one of my favorite mythical creatures that I've ever heard of. I don't know if you've probably heard of it, the Wendigo.
I've heard of the Skinwalker.
Okay. So you've heard of kind of like the beast form of the Wendigo?
Right, like shapeshifter.
It can be.
Okay.
But the Wendigo actually didn't start as a physical being, and I'm actually going to take you back to when it actually started. The mythical Wendigo actually started a long time ago when the Native American and Canadian indigenous Algonquian tribes in the north were experiencing a really hard time during the harsh, snowy winter months. Because when the weather is that severe and it's snowy and you're traveling and the settlers and the tribes are moving from place to place, unfortunately the weather takes a lot of lives. Now, because food is so scarce, if someone were to die, unfortunately sometimes cannibalism took effect. The tribes actually came up with this Wendigo tale or folklore to try and deter the tribespeople from eating the fallen. And they actually stated that if you were to partake in eating and resorting to cannibalism, you would be possessed by the Wendigo spirit. And therefore, if that were to happen, you would be outcast from your group, forced to live alone because you were now possessed by said spirit. Now, when you were possessed by the Wendigo spirit, you craved human flesh. You were now a cannibal. You were possessed by this creature. So that's how the whole thing started. It was kind of like a cautionary tale. The very first Wendigo is actually said to have been a warrior that actually sold his soul to the devil in exchange for the skills to best his enemies and save his tribe. When the battle was over, his tribe actually banned him from the group and forced him to be an outcast, and upon leaving, he was actually cursed with cannibalistic desires. That's what I've researched to find the first Wendigo. So it actually wasn't the big beast that people know today. I'm assuming that's what you understand the Wendigo to be, Cleet.
Right. My question, though, is, are you saying it's folklore, or did they actually experience that and did it become folklore?
So they actually created that. They believed in it, that if you were to eat human flesh, you actually became a cannibal because that's what you wanted anymore, right? That's all you desired. That was the Wendigo. So it started like a trait or a tale, and that formed into what the Wendigo was. As time progressed, the Wendigo faded somewhat into anonymity until the year 1907. In this year, Algernon Blackwood actually wrote his short story titled The Wendigo, where he actually talks of a hunting party who ventured into Canadian backwoods, and upon their return, they were forever changed by an encounter with the Wendigo. So it kind of faded away. He wrote his story, and now people are starting to talk about it again. This is actually one of my favorite stories about the Wendigo. Around this same time, a member of the Cree tribe named Jack Fiddler, who was a shaman, claimed to have defeated 14 Wendigos in his time. You're shaking your head like you disagree with that.
No, I mean, I bet that's just him trying to act all tough.
Okay, so it could be. Now, as a shaman, he was actually helping tribes heal. Remember, the Wendigo at this time isn't a being, it's actually a spirit that's possessed. The tribespeople who were said to have been possessed by the Wendigo would go to this Jack Fiddler and say, I have the spirit in me, I need this to stop. And he would actually kill them via a form of euthanasia to stop the physical transformation into a Wendigo.
It's pretty extreme.
It's very extreme.
Oh my gosh.
It's very extreme. Now, 14 he claims to have killed. Now, word spread of this, and it got around that he was, murdering these people who were said to be turning into a Wendigo. It differs from where I got the sources, but the last victim he killed was a woman. He actually strangled her to death because she was claiming to have been possessed. This actually led to Jack's arrest with his brother Joseph, who had actually been helping him kill these Wendigo spirits. Upon arrest, Jack actually escaped and hung himself because he didn't want to be put to death. His brother Joseph actually was put to death, but 3 days later would have been granted appeal.
So he didn't get put to death at all?
He did.
Oh, he did?
So they killed him, and then 3 days later found out he would have had his appeal.
Oh, man.
So they killed him 3 days before. It's shit. Around this time, because of the Fiddler killings and because of Blackwood's story, credibility of the Wendigo is actually increasing. People are starting to talk about it again. They also pointed towards the notion of a physical and mental illness that is now described as Wendigo psychosis. Have you heard of Wendigo psychosis, Cleet?
Not at all.
So some people argue that it's not real, but if you were to Google the term Wendigo psychosis, you're going to find something that says it's a culture-bound mental illness that creates an intense hunger for human flesh and the fear of cannibalism.
So it's like group psychosis. They believe it so much that it just happens? Or
Right. Because it's culturally bound, so because of the fact that if you were to now experience and let's say you were craving human flesh, but you were so afraid of becoming a cannibal, that's the Wendigo psychosis.
Did they believe like they'd be shapeshifters or anything like that? Am I following that correctly?
That comes later. This is the origins of the Wendigo.
I
It
see.
actually started as a spirit.
Okay.
But I'm glad you brought that up. On the topic of Wendigo psychosis, one of the most famous tales of Wendigo psychosis actually comes from a man by the name of Swift Runner. Now, Swift Runner was a member of the Cree tribe during the 1800s. He had taken his wife and 6 children to live in the forest and make a campground there. During the harsh winter months, they lived out there in the forest, so he came back to town and returned alone and stated that his family died of starvation due to the harsh winter conditions. Now, the police at Fort Saskatchewan noticed that he didn't look like he'd been missing any meals. He looked just fine, like he had been eating. So they decide, hey, you know what? We're going to go check this campground to see what's going on. And as you can imagine, they show up and they saw some pretty intense shit. They found human bones scattered across the whole campground that had been completely picked clean of all meat. And some of the bones had even been snapped in half and had the marrow sucked out of them.
So he ate his family.
He ate his entire family. Now, I didn't say earlier, but he had a wife and 6 children.
Oh, my God.
So he ate all 7 members of his family. Now, some tellings say that his first son died first, and the family actually ate him to survive, and then they started to die, and he just continued to eat their family. Now, Wendigo psychosis is kicking in, but the police got back to him and basically said, dude, we found your whole family at the campground eaten alive. He admitted to eating his entire family after killing them to survive, but he said that he was possessed by a Wendigo spirit. Because of that, the police said, yeah, I know, I don't agree with that. You murdered your whole family. So they actually later hanged him for his crimes in Alberta's first government-sanctioned hanging.
You know, Britton, this actually reminds me of a story of a guy that was going through, I believe it was the Amazon rainforest, and he found a tribe that suffered from this weird mental ailment where they would start laughing hysterically and they'd lose motor function and slowly die. And after doing tons of research, what they found out was the tribe had this practice of whenever someone died, they would eat the person that died.
Right.
And what was going on is they would eat the person's brain, and it would have a protein in the brain that would unravel and somehow go to your brain and just spongify it and kill
I've heard
you.
about that. Yeah, it's a bacteria that spongifies your brain.
Yeah. And once they stopped that practice, obviously the disease went away. But at least even in the medical community, there are some negative consequences of eating people.
Of course, there's a lot of negative consequences. And medically, like if someone drops dead, they're probably not the healthiest of beings anyway, and probably not the best thing to eat. But during the harsh winter times when they're traveling, you don't have a lot of options. That's kind of the spiritual piece of the Wendigo. It's a spirit that's said to possess you, or kind of like a medical term that causes you to crave human flesh. Now, I want to jump into the physical embodiment of the Wendigo, which is actually what it's most known for, right? Because you were saying something that it's kind of like a Skinwalker type thing. So we're going to lead into that right now. Descriptions of what the Wendigo looks like can actually vary depending on the source. And it's actually changed so much because of how mainstream media has actually popularized it. It's now a part of video games and movies and television series and even books. One of my favorites is Stephen King's Pet Sematary. The Wendigo makes an appearance. Basically, the Wendigo is said to be a towering man-beast standing at over 15 feet tall. It's got glowing owl-like eyes, long yellowed fangs, terrible long claws, an overly long tongue, and lips that have been chewed away. So because of its insatiable hunger, it chews its own lips.
Did they ever talk about the smell of the Wendigo?
Oh, yeah. I'm not done with the description here, buddy. Its skin, which is actually described as yellowish and sallow or even gray, and sometimes covered in patches of fur, appears to be stretched so tight across its bones that the bones can actually be seen through the skin, like a thin veil. Because of the constant hunger, the Wendigo appears very emaciated and bony, and the skin reeks of decay and death. Some people are actually saying you can smell the Wendigo getting closer because of how bad it smells. So imagine this 15-foot giant who's like rotting and decimating because it can't keep up with its never-ending hunger for human flesh.
Damn.
Yeah, it's intense. And some people are saying, or some sources are saying, that when it walks, it almost walks as if it's falling apart. Like it's disheveled and it can't keep itself together because of how hungry it always is. Now, it is said that the beast's body and its hunger will actually grow in proportion to the amount of flesh it eats. The larger the meal, the larger it gets, which means it needs to eat more and more, so it'll never actually satisfy its hunger, which sounds completely shitty in my opinion.
That'd be the worst feeling in the world, always being starving.
Right, you eat a Big Mac meal and you decide, no, I'm not full right now, I need to eat something more.
Like, I love to eat, but most of it is just because you want to alleviate that hunger.
Yeah, I get pissed off if I don't have a snack every 2 hours, but the point of being so hungry that you are about to die, but it will never starve to death. That's the crazy thing, is it will have this constant ravenous hunger, but will never starve to death. The worst possible feeling I can ever think about it, right? Now, the Algonquian tribes, this is where I don't know if this is fictitious, it kind of came later. So, the Algonquian legend describes the creature as a giant with a heart of ice. Sometimes it is thought to be entirely made of ice. Its body is skeletal and deformed, with missing lips and toes. Now, around the turn of the 20th century, a vast number of their people went missing, mysteriously, to which they actually blamed the Wendigo and gave it the nickname, the Spirit of Lonely Places. So their people were just vanished, and they always thought it was the Wendigo.
I'd be terrified if that was going on back then.
Yeah, it's bad, because, I mean, you wake up and half your tribe is missing, and the Wendigo came and took care of it, right?
Oof.
Now, the Ojibwa tribe describe it as a large creature as tall as a tree, with a lipless mouth and jagged teeth. Its breath was a strange hiss, its footprints full of blood, and it ate any man, woman, or child who ventured into its territory, and those were the lucky ones. Sometimes the Wendigo chose to possess a person instead, and then the luckless individual became a Wendigo himself, hunting down those he had once loved and feasting upon their flesh. Not only is it a physical embodiment, but it also has the powers to possess and turn you into a Wendigo if you're ever in the vicinity. That's how the Wendigo was described in modern day time. Now, if you were to Google Wendigo right now, you're actually going to see a couple pictures that might actually have the head of a stag that has antlers. No one can describe where this came from.
I've seen that.
Yeah. I mean, it looks really cool because a lot of them have antlers, but they can't describe where it came from because the Algonquian tribes actually held the stag to such a high stature that it makes no sense to put the head of a stag on this being unless they were trying so hard to deter against cannibalism that they held their highest animal to ward you off against it, like you're almost desiccating the stag. Okay, so now we're going to talk about if you're in the vicinity of it, how do you get rid of it, how do you escape it, or how do you potentially kill the Wendigo?
It's good to know.
Yeah, so it's not going to be easy, I can tell you that much. here's the crazy thing. If you do find yourself in the presence of a Wendigo, you're fucked. I'm sorry. You are. You're not going to get out of there. And here's why. Wendigos are impressive hunters. They have incredible speed and will do anything to get food. Nothing will stand in their way. I mean, you got to think about this. This has to eat to survive. If you're in the forests, you're going to get eaten. It's not going to let anything get in the way of that. Sometimes the Wendigo, simply being in the presence or the vicinity of the Wendigo, will actually leave you mentally broken or empty or even possessed by the Wendigo spirit.
Britton, so does the Wendigo exclusively eat human meat?
Human flesh.
Okay.
Yes, it's a very cannibalistic spirit. It has no interest in animals that I've seen. Now, if you're listening to this and you've seen a tale where it eats an animal and you're like, oh, this guy has no idea what he's talking about, I apologize. I'm sure there's many tales, but for me, what I've seen to research, it's all human meat.
Okay.
So even if you escape the physical part of the Wendigo, he can possess your spirit even just from being in the vicinity. So he will turn you into a Wendigo yourself if you happen to make it out of there. The Wendigo can actually pick up on a panicked heartbeat from miles away and will stealthily stalk its victims for long periods of a time. Even if you're like panicking, you're kind of, let's say you make it into the forest and you're lost, you start to get panicked, it will pick up on your heartbeat.
So do you think that's where the theory of saying don't think about a Wendigo or mention its name comes from?
Because if you do, you kind of get a little elevated heartbeat, which then it can pick up on.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Now, I know what you're thinking, right? Because you're kind of looking at me and you're saying, I'm just not going to go into the forest. I'm not going to do this thing. Why would I go into the forest? I'm fine. That's where the Wendigos are. But here's the thing. The Wendigos are actually said to possess sometimes human voices that can mimic a call for help. And not only that, but they can mimic a voice that sounds personal to you.
I don't want to go on a tangent here, Britton, but when you were ever a kid, did you ever hear your parents' voice when they weren't there?
I'm sure I have. Yeah, I've heard a lot of crazy shit when I was a kid and saw a lot of crazy shit.
I've had that experience growing up, and I remember when I realized like my parents weren't home, that was the scariest feeling I've ever had.
Right, because you can hear them.
Right.
They're not there.
And they're beckoning you to come to them.
Right. So I think you had a run-in with a Wendigo then.
Probably not, but
Probably.
maybe. God.
Do you live near the forest?
No.
Okay. I mean, so it will mimic a voice and call you into the forest because people aren't in the forest all the time, so it has to lure you into its natural environment. Once you're there, of course, it can change. Okay, so depending on the age of the Wendigo, if they've been alive for longer, their powers actually become more and more. They get bigger, stronger. Of course, they're always starving. They're always ragged looking, but they become powerful. In fact, the oldest Wendigos can actually change the weather patterns to cause a snowstorm or even tornadoes to make it difficult to see in the forest, and even the oldest Wendigos have been said to create pitch blackness dark enough to blot out the sun. So let's say you happen to make it out of the forest, right? You're running away from the Wendigo and you happen to make it indoors, you lock the door, you're safe, right? False. One of the traits the Wendigo has is it can actually unlock doors, get inside, and once it does, it will eat anyone and everyone in the vicinity. So if you're making it into this cabin, you lock the doors, you're safe. Nope, it's coming in. It's going to eat you and your family. And it will actually turn those spaces into a Wendigo hibernation space or domicile. How do you kill the Wendigo?
Guns.
Guns, right? Lots of guns. No, in fact, it's not guns. So depending on the source, again, one of the main sources that I found is that you have to light the entirety of the creature on fire. You can't just wave a torch in its face. No, the whole thing has to go up in flames. Other sources play off the werewolf similarities because some people say it is a cousin of Bigfoot or Sasquatch, and some are stating that it's in the werewolf family. Based off the werewolf similarity, some state that you have to drive a pure silver item through its ice-cold heart. Then, to make it even more difficult, once the heart is pierced, you need to shatter it to bits, gather the bits in a silver box, and bury it in a church cemetery.
That's such a pain in the ass.
Right. Oh, and that's not all. That's just the heart. To go back, you have to first dismember the rest of the Wendigo with a silver-plated axe. You have to salt and burn the body and scatter the ashes in the wind. If you neglect any of those steps, the Wendigo will resurrect to come for you specifically. It will hunt you down and inflict a slow, torturous, agonizing, painful death. That is the physical embodiment of the Wendigo. So it actually started as a spirit and through time grew to become this physical being. Whether you believe in the physical embodiment of the Wendigo or rather the spirit that possesses and eats your way at your mind, the lore behind the Wendigo is terrifying and has changed over the course of time. So it's actually seen its fair share of popular media. In fact, it was even in a Marvel comic book, The Incredible Hulk number 162 in the year 1973, where it battled the Hulk and Wolverine.
Oh man, that's cool.
Yeah, it's pretty intense. So the Wendigo spirit embodied all that the indigenous Algonquian tribes feared and despised. If you were to take your stature above everyone else's for greed or gluttony, or if you, again, ate another human when they passed away, because they feared all those things so much, that's what created the Wendigo spirit to come through. But because of mainstream media and all this popularization that it's received, the Wendigo has now grown and adapted and changed, which is why if you Google Wendigo, you'll see all these different variations. To end this, if you don't have any desire to witness a Wendigo, simple. Don't eat people.
The reason why I asked you the question about what it smelled like is, going back to my story when he shot the wolf and how it smelled like rotting meat.
Yeah.
Do you think that wolf could have potentially been the same thing as a Wendigo?
Ooh, a tie-in. I definitely think it's possible. The smell of it is obviously because its body is consistently dying because it can't hold nutrition.
And that's kind of what I was thinking when I was reading the wolf story,
Yeah.
Was it just some type of carcass? Because if you shoot it, something that's already dead, you're not going to do anything.
Same thing with the Wendigo. You shoot it, it's not going to kill it.
It's an interesting commonality there.
And as we did state in the very first episode, we do want to hear from you guys, our listeners, with any topics you want us to cover. Again, we will do all the research if you just want to say, hey, I want to hear about this. Send us an email. Our email address is entertheabysspod@gmail.com. You can also follow us on Facebook at Enter the Abyss Pod and on Instagram at Enter the Abyss Pod, all of which will be in the description below. But we really want to hear from you guys, and if you do send us some material, we'll give you a shout out on a future episode of our podcast. We definitely want to hear everything you guys have, and if you've written a story personally, we'd love to narrate that for you as well.
As always, thank you for entering the abyss.